Okay, so first, thank you guys for agreeing to be part of this panel. My goal in this panel is to provide some insight to this room, right? We have our ventures, we have other angel investors, probably some aspiring angels, and probably just a whole bunch of curious people who want to understand, how angel investing works, why you do it, and how you do it so well. So we're going to probe a little. We're going to try to get beyond the what do you look for, team tech, and whatever the other buzzwords are. Let me start it off easy, and then we'll dig in. I'd like to ask each of you to take a minute to just introduce or tell us about your approach to doing due diligence. And really what I'm interested in is, do you have certain criteria you look for? Is it different across different types of companies or different technology areas? And as an outsider, if I were to look at your investments, would they make sense to me in a pattern? And David, why don't I start with you?
No, they wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
We're an investor in over 300 companies. We make about 30 to 40 investments a year across all different spaces: consumer healthcare, frontier tech, and anything sort of that sits in the middle. We do have a common thread. I think it's very hard to see that from the outside if you don't talk to founders. And I think that that's the hardest part of sort of the outside lens of investing generally, is you end up from the outside judging either the idea, what's visible on a website, or theoretically the market. But at the end of the day, when you're investing at the earliest stage, you're funding people. And we believe that we hold that same bar of founders across all these different spaces. And so we do see a common thread. We have younger people that work for us that we're training to be sort of that same lens. And the biggest push that we throw at them is figure out our bar and hold yourself to that as you meet new companies. And that's really the key. In terms of diligence, we're optimists just by nature. We have to be. We're funding things that are 10 to 15 years from realizing. And so you have to, predict the future. You're investing into the future. And in doing that, our intention is we want to invest in somebody. We're inclined when we take a meeting to make an investment. There's nothing like diligence to screw that up.
Okay, great. Okay, and I'm going to come back and push on something you said, but Barney, let's hear from you.
Is this working? Yeah, I think we all have actually different perspectives. So for me, there's a big branch in terms of whether I'm like leading the round or whether I'm following the round. And in general, if I'm following the round, then I'm looking to whoever's leading the round to be smarter and have done more diligence than I am. And then there's certain people where it's basically if Chen Fong's investing, then I'm just going to follow. No questions asked. It just doesn't matter. So things like that. So really, who am I investing along with in terms of the company? And then if it's category that I deeply understand myself, well, I'll go and do more work on the diligence. I think the thing that I spend probably a lot of time on is thinking about this round, because as an angel investor, as a seed and pre-seed or seed investor, really it's all about what happens in the next round. So I have to channel who are the investors in the next round going to be, what are they going to be looking for, what are we going to do with the money now, and one key thing that I often tell the startups to, think about that Series A deck, start writing it now, and what is that deck going to be when you're not raising your funds? And you can have milestones in there that have been achieved. Those milestones have to have been achieved in time for you to still go out and start your round and still have about 4 months to go out and raise it. So I look for that internal logic, and will actually milestones be achieved? What are the risks against that? That's kind of the main thing, and do we have a business plan and a model? So I spend a lot of time on that modeling with the company, and that helps me also understand how the founding team are thinking about the business. So by the time we're done with that, I've got a pretty good feeling of what this can be.
Okay, great. Sally.
Yeah, I, again, start with our founders at a very, very early stage. CDL's given me the opportunity to do that. I think it's easy to get excited by the technology, but to me, what's more important is, can the founder eventually sell and commercialize both the product and the company over the long term? And having the opportunity to work with them early on to help them understand, are they going to be able to take this product and commercialize it? Because to me, that's really, really important, and that's going to be fundamental to them being able to raise and continue on and grow and scale the company. And you meet different technical founders, and some people you can see can scale into that role, and that's my preference. Somebody that's passionate also about the technology, but can also go out and sell the company and the products directly into the marketplace. So I start very, very early on and often work with the entrepreneur or the founder for the first 6 or 9 months before I actually write a check.
So let me push each of you on that. So I'm going to work backwards now. Sally, you said, can they sell and commercialize the product over the long term? All the founders are going to say, of course I can do that. They're going to get up there and say they can do that. So when you do this, you must have a way of deciphering the ones who say they can do this and the ones you believe can do this. And what is it over that 6 months you work with? What is it that helps you know it?
To be honest, the first time you meet somebody and they tell you, you say that I can ask 5 questions and make it clear that they can't do that. Everything from
So
understanding.
give us one of those questions.
Well, okay, do you have a sales process? Do you know what the price of your good is going to be? Do you have a sales contract in place? Do you even know what your target? Like it's very clear. And some of these founders will very, very quickly start to digest that and start to figure it out. All of us started at one point not selling and figuring out how to sell. And some have that innate ability to do that, and some people don't. So I think there are questions that you can ask, and you can see how they can progress. And I think we all see those people that can tell a story or can connect with people. That's really, really important if you're promoting a company or a product or even being a leader in your own company.
Okay, and Barney, I want to ask sort of a similar thing. You said I go to the company and I want to see that they can see the path to the Series A already. And again, what distinguishes the ones who do it well from the ones who don't, right? They can all put together the next deck, but what distinguishes them?
Yeah, and actually, let me back one thing I forgot to mention, which is that, because it's almost so basic for me, but I've got a really comprehensive set of questions that I ask startups that are really uncommonly, asked. And, I'll basically, I think that adds a lot of value in the conversations. And, I've given talks about this at CDL and others, and you can find my talk on crucial questions for AI startups. But it's things like, how good does the product need to be successful? And these are often questions which people don't even ask themselves and don't know how to answer. Even big companies, most people don't answer these questions well. And so when you get into that, by the time you're done, you can understand how are people thinking about this. This is capable of being.
What's one question you ask founders you think other angels don't think to ask?
Well, like I said,
Now they'll ask it.
It's actually what is the quality? How do you measure the quality of your product? How do you know you're going to build a product that will actually be successful? And so if it's an AI system, for example, people come and say, oh, I've got a F-score accuracy of sort of 90%. And that's great. Is that good enough? Like, in fact, the accuracy is that what customers buying accuracy? No, they're buying some kind of a solution. You got to make your payoff matrix and the entire thing. And by the time you're done, what's the world like today without your product? What's the world with your product? Where is the threshold where actually the payoff makes sense for the customers? And you go through that journey, and it's a lot more refined than just I'm an AI startup that's winning the deep learning competition in this category.
Right. And David, on the founder, the founder piece, what is it you guys look for, right? You make tons of investments, which means you might see tons of founders.
Just touching on this, I think the myth of sort of successful angels is that we're going to fail most of the time. Right. And there has to be an acceptance of failure. And so what I don't fancy myself as is right or good, because if I'm failing over 50% of the time, I clearly haven't figured that much out. And I think that
but if you fail a little less than other people,
it's better than other people, but not good. But I mean it, and I think that that's like the first step in investing. You have to accept that you're in a business of failure, which can't emotionally affect you because you have to keep taking shots on goal. We're in Canada, we'll do hockey metaphors.
Basketball.
Sorry, yeah. But in terms of founders, something we like to ask is, we like to ask questions that we don't believe they've ever been asked before in a first meeting, so you can see them actively think. And you want a founder to be creative on the fly because they're going to be put in situations throughout the course of the company to do that. So how much money are you going to raise over the next 5 years? They might have an answer to Series A, but what's their ambition? So we're looking for ambition, leadership, some sort of secret. Do they have an insight into the market, into how they're going to build the company? Recruiting is just so crucial to every company. So are you hiring people you know? Who are those people? Why are your best friends not joining your company? Why are people you've worked with before not quitting their job to join you today? These are things that I want to have some insight into, because if you're not comfortable sort of asking your smartest friend to stop whatever they're doing in life to join you, you're probably not all in on your company. And so there's a bunch of those soft questions that I think actually give you more insight. I'm not smart enough to ask AI questions. So skip that.
So let me change course a little bit. What's each of your biggest miss? What's the company you saw, you said no to, and has turned out to do incredibly well?
My first pass was Zynga. That was like the first time I ever said no to a company, so that was a mistake. We make mistakes weekly, probably. TransferWise, Casper,
Do you track those mistakes?
desperately.
And then what? Desperately. And what do you do? What do you do? Do you try to sort of reverse
Stare at that
engineer
list
those?
every night. I don't
But
know.
how do you?
What am I supposed to do?
How do you get better? How do you learn from it? Those. I'm just asking. Do you actually try to look at the thinking that went into it? What did you put?
Yeah.
on
What
and
did we do
should
wrong?
you have
What
done differently?
what did we miss in that interaction? What did we miss in the pitch? And the hardest part is thinking you're wrong only happens in the first sort of 5 years because really smart investors invested in the company. There's no actual outcome that you're mapping and said you're wrong until there is an exit at the end of the day. So that timeline again is egregious. So to go back 10 years and say, what 10 years ago was the world like? What was my mindset like? What was I thinking? What did I know? It's really hard to map that. So what we try to do is if a great investor, and we have a list, funds one of the companies we passed on, we'll go back to that interaction we had with the founder and say, why did we not invest and what did they see? And
Right.
just sort of back to the people.
Barney, Sally, you guys, what
well,
do you do with those?
Well, I think first things you say, do you track the ones that you missed? I think it's more like the ones you missed come to track you and haunt you
Right,
every
they
single
haunt
day. So you're like, oh man. And then I think, ironically, the ones that I feel like I missed the most are there that were in my inbox, and I had the opportunity, and I was just too busy with other things. So it's really the hardest part is this opportunity cost. You get flooded with things. And so, it's easy to go back and, oh man, that company's really succeeding. There was that thing. Why on earth didn't I do it? Oh, it's because I had these other things. And well, the other thing is good as that one. Well, obviously, maybe not.
Not
in
exposed,
retrospect.
but right.
But, there's a lot of survivorship biases and hindsight biases in this game. And so it's easy to say, oh yeah, I turned down that one and now that's great. But you've also then got to remember all the other ones you turned down. And most of those were basically failures, so you made a good choice. So it's really kind of a hard game. And I try to think about what information I have at the time. Most of this, like, what can I do better about not just being more efficient and not missing the ones that are in my inbox? And how can I set up better systems around that?
Sort of piggybacking on that really quickly is, I believe our biggest errors happen at the sort of fringe. So if we're doing 40 companies a year, that next 20 is where that biggest miss tends to happen. So every year my fear is like, should we just do another 20? I wonder if that just pushes out the mistakes sort of the next set.
Right. Do they haunt you,
Yeah.
Sally?
Well, I think I don't know how much it's going to haunt me. It's still early days. I mean, it's first. I've only been investing for the last sort of 3 to 4 years, so we'll see how well some of the companies I missed end up doing. But it's a little bit different because there's a lot of companies. I just, like to Barney's point, I can't invest in every single company, but I maintain relationships with a lot of the entrepreneurs that have gone out and fundraised with other CDL members, and I will consistently help them because I see that's just extending my network. And will it haunt me? Actually, if they go back and succeed and I've helped them on that journey, I think that just helps everybody. So I don't really get haunted because there's just too many opportunities out there, and you have to pick some and keep moving on. But I do think that we're in a kind of a stage in technology advancement and company advancement that I do wish that I had even more and more resources because there are so many great opportunities. I don't think the opportunities that we're seeing today existed in the numbers that they do 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
And how should we think about the impact an angel investor has on a company? There's this, putting on my academic hat, there's a lot of research that's trying to figure out, do angel investors actually contribute to the success of their companies, or do they just pick companies that would have done well? And I think the research is, recent paper out of Harvard shows both matter, but that there really is a causal effect. How involved do you get with your companies? And this is probably differs across the three of you. Obviously, David, you can't be involved with 300 companies. But what do you see as the main value add beyond the capital that you bring to your companies?
I mean, I think just, basically why Ajay put CDL kind of in place. I mean, I've run a company, I've scaled it, 300 engineers, I've sold products around the world, so I can sit down. But there's a lot that I learned also from every company I invest in, and you kind of keep redistributing that from company to investor to other companies, et cetera. So in my case, I am very, very involved in the beginning, and the best thing that can happen is that they don't need my involvement. Like, I really see they talk about children, and I have my own children, so about just getting them going, and hopefully they call me when they need me, and you have that relationship. and then you're appropriately involved, but you're not, this is their company and they need to run it, and you need to pick people that can run their companies.
Barney?
Yeah, I say that there's kind of a pre-investment phase, which is very much like what CDL is all about. So there's actually a whole lot of work that goes into helping these companies up front, long before there's actually an investment. It's kind of counterintuitive, but we're actually working against ourselves. We're making the companies more valuable by the time we get to invest, but that's kind of part of what we're giving and paying it forward in CDL. And then kind of post-investment, I think the companies are tapping in. These companies, the best ones, are going to be very, very focused, and they're going to see what they need to see to do what they need to do. And then, angel investors, we're seeing so many different companies, so many opportunities, and we're touching so many different partners that it's like you're tapping into this sort of massive network of information, ideas, and opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And so, we can't spend all of our time on these things, but actually, every company I'm investing in has some of a mind share. And then I'll be meeting someone, and then it'll be just this magic moment where, oh, wow, that's a perfect thing for this company. You should go, and then magic can happen there. And the human emotion robotics story was one just example we just had from a couple days ago. It's like, hey, I'm talking to people, and this is happening. Oh, good, now they know, and then they can go and jump in, and then magical things can happen for the company. The operating mode I tend to have with companies, I say, I'm not going to be like every week or even every month in some fixed process, but you'll come to me when there's the key moments that matter. And I think that the fate of a lot of companies, the execution is the daily work, all kinds of incredible daily work, but then a lot of the fate will come down to the key moments and what happened to those, good opportunities or challenges, and that's where we want to be able to come to an angel investor like us, and that conversation and that support can make all the difference.
David, what about you guys? What do you bring to your companies?
I think the most overrated group of people in successful companies are investors, by far, right? The investors get all this credit, they get press, they get attached to these companies. The office manager, the person that developed the culture inside of that company, is so much more impactful on that day-to-day basis. As an investor, what can you do? You can make introductions. That's 8 seconds, right? You type an email, that's out the door. So is that this magical value add? I don't know. I'm a service provider. I think the more we can build relationships with our founders for them to feel comfortable coming to us to talk, vent, ask questions, get advice, that's a great place to be. That's not going to happen with every investment you make because your chemistry is not going to be there, or that founder has people in that role already. So to me, my job is to morph to be able to support a founder and never get in their way.
Okay, so I have a whole bunch of other questions I would like to ask you, but all four of us can see that the clock has just run down to 0. And so that we don't get in trouble for going over time with the bosses. Thank you guys for doing this. These guys are, of course, around all day. We're about to have lunch, and so if you want to follow up, you can find them.